What if a simple act of kindness on a flight set off a whirlwind of betrayal, conspiracy, and redemption? When David Carter, an African American AI engineer, saves the life of a wealthy CEO's son mid flight, he unknowingly triggers a deadly power struggle that puts his life and career on the line. As secrets unravel, dark schemes are exposed, and unexpected alliances form, David must fight to protect his groundbreaking project and his integrity. Can he survive the ruthless world of corporate manipulation and emerge victorious? The flight from New York to Tokyo was one of the longest and most challenging journeys for anyone. But for David Carter, it was more than just a long haul. It was a turning point in his career. David was a 35-year-old African-American artificial intelligence engineer who had just been invited to speak at an international technology conference in Tokyo. His ambitious AI project, an intelligent traffic management system capable of revolutionizing global transportation, was set to be the highlight of the event. As the taxi pulled up to JFK Airport, David couldn't help but feel the weight of pressure on his shoulders. For him, this event wasn't just an opportunity to showcase his technology, but also the key to attracting potential investors who could help him and his team overcome the financial difficulties threatening to extinguish their dreams. David's wife, Mira, had reassured him before he left. "You've worked so hard for this, love. Just be yourself. They'll see your passion." Her words echoed in his mind, offering a flicker of comfort amidst the whirlwind of stress. Stepping into the departure hall, David dragged a small suitcase and a backpack containing his laptop and crucial documents. He had meticulously checked every detail of his presentation, visualizing every possible scenario. The presentation slides were polished to perfection, and his speech was rehearsed to the point of muscle memory. However, there was one thing he hadn't anticipated: a ticketing mishap. When he reached the check-in counter, the airline staff gave him a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. Due to a system error, your business class seat has been downgraded to economy. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience," the attendant explained with a forced smile. David felt a flicker of disappointment but maintained his composure. He was too accustomed to facing challenges to let frustration get the best of him. "That's okay," he replied calmly. "Just make sure I have enough space to work on my laptop." After receiving his boarding pass, he moved through security, silently observing the hurried crowd around him. A group of businessmen speaking Japanese stood nearby, and he guessed they were on the same flight. Finding a seat by the window in the waiting area, he opened his laptop to review his slides one last time. Despite his attempts to focus, his mind wandered back to the downgrade. It felt like a minor setback, but in a world where impressions mattered, the change in seating stung more than he wanted to admit. Meanwhile, in the business lounge, Hana Saito sat gracefully in a sleek gray business dress, her face expressionless as she lightly scrolled through her phone. As the CEO of Saito Corporation, Asia's leading technology conglomerate, Hana exuded an aura of cold authority. Beside her sat her 12-year-old son, Kenji Saito, a delicate-featured boy with a distant gaze, clutching a small pillow tightly. Kenji had been diagnosed with autism since childhood, and this made Hana constantly anxious whenever she had to bring him on business trips. This time, she had no choice but to take Kenji along, as the contract signing with their international partner in Tokyo was of utmost importance. Two bodyguards stood behind her, as silent as shadows. Hana couldn't afford any disruptions, not with so much on the line. Yet deep inside, she knew that the stress of travel would push Kenji's anxiety to the limit. When the boarding announcement came, Hana adjusted her coat and took her son's hand, guiding him into the business class cabin under the admiring eyes of many passengers. No one knew that behind her regal appearance was a lonely mother constantly battling prejudice against her imperfect child. As they settled into their seats, Hana glanced out the window, already mentally rehearsing her speech for the upcoming signing. She barely noticed Kenji's breathing growing more erratic. David boarded the plane later, weaving his way through the crowded aisle. Eventually, he found his seat, the very last row, right next to the restroom. The cramped and noisy environment made him frown, but he tried to focus on his work, opening his laptop to make some final adjustments to his AI model. The hum of conversations and the persistent sound of flushing toilets made concentration difficult. He adjusted his headphones, trying to drown out the noise with calming music. In the business class cabin, Hana seated Kenji by the window, hoping the sky view would help him stay calm. But as more passengers walked past, Kenji began to show signs of distress. He curled up, his hand clutching his mother's sleeve, breathing heavily. "Mom, there are too many people," Kenji whispered, his voice trembling. "It's okay, Kenji," Hana replied softly, stroking his hair to comfort him. But her eyes remained tense. One of the bodyguards leaned in, whispering, "Ma'am, we will ensure no one approaches." However, things didn't go as Hana hoped. As an African-American passenger passed by, none other than David, Kenji suddenly flinched and let out a small cry. Hana immediately stood up, her face darkening. "Flight attendant!" she called out sharply, her voice cold and commanding. "That man frightened my son. I demand he be moved elsewhere immediately." The flight attendant approached cautiously, caught off guard by the sudden demand. David stood frozen, confused as to why he was being accused. Before he could process the situation, he was asked to move to the back of the plane. "I'm sorry, sir, we need you to relocate to the end of the cabin for the safety of other passengers," the attendant said apologetically. David didn't argue, simply gathering his belongings and moving to the rear of the plane. An inexplicable feeling of frustration and injustice settled within him, a blend of disappointment and the bitter sting of unwarranted discrimination. As he adjusted to his new cramped seat, David couldn't help but dwell on the powerful woman from earlier. Why had she reacted so harshly? Was it prejudice or excessive protection? He couldn't know for sure, but the sense of unfairness lingered heavily on his mind. Staring out the tiny window, David let out a slow breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He was no stranger to subtle racism and implicit biases, but the bluntness of Hana's reaction had caught him off guard. He wondered how someone so successful and poised could act with such harsh judgment. Determined not to let it cloud his spirit, he refocused on his presentation, typing new notes and refining his talking points. Yet every so often his mind wandered back to the boy Kenji and his frightened expression. Maybe it wasn't entirely about race. Maybe the kid was genuinely scared and Hana just reacted out of maternal instinct. It didn't make the sting any less, but it gave David a slight sense of perspective. Taking a deep breath, he reminded himself that sometimes people act irrationally under stress, and maybe Hana was dealing with more than met the eye. However, things didn't go as Hana hoped. As an African-American passenger passed by, none other than David, Kenji suddenly flinched and let out a small cry. Hana immediately stood up, her face darkening. "Flight attendant!" she called out sharply, her voice cold and commanding. "That man frightened my son. I demand he be moved elsewhere immediately." The flight attendant approached cautiously, caught off guard by the sudden demand. David stood frozen, confused as to why he was being accused. Before he could process the situation, he was asked to move to the back of the plane. "I'm sorry, sir, we need you to relocate to the end of the cabin for the safety of other passengers," the attendant said apologetically. David didn't argue, simply gathering his belongings and moving to the rear of the plane. An inexplicable feeling of frustration and injustice settled within him, a blend of disappointment and the bitter sting of unwarranted discrimination. As he adjusted to his new cramped seat, David couldn't help but dwell on the powerful woman from earlier. Why had she reacted so harshly? Was it prejudice or excessive protection? He couldn't know for sure, but the sense of unfairness lingered heavily on his mind. Staring out the tiny window, David let out a slow breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He was no stranger to subtle racism and implicit biases, but the bluntness of Hana's reaction had caught him off guard. He wondered how someone so successful and poised could act with such harsh judgment. Determined not to let it cloud his spirit, he refocused on his presentation, typing new notes and refining his talking points. Yet every so often his mind wandered back to the boy Kenji and his frightened expression. Maybe it wasn't entirely about race. Maybe the kid was genuinely scared and Hana just reacted out of maternal instinct. It didn't make the sting any less, but it gave David a slight sense of perspective. Taking a deep breath, he reminded himself that sometimes people act irrationally under stress, and maybe Hana was dealing with more than met the eye. As the plane steadied and the turbulence subsided, a strange hush fell over the cabin. Passengers who had been whispering anxiously now sat silently, digesting the chaos that had just unfolded. David remained in his seat, still shaken by the adrenaline rush and the sheer weight of what had just happened. He couldn't help but glance back at the business class section where Hana and Kenji were sitting. The curtain that separated business class from economy fluttered slightly, and through the gap, David saw Hana leaning over her son, murmuring softly, her expression filled with a mix of guilt and gratitude. One of the flight attendants approached him quietly. "Sir, the captain would like to speak with you after we land," she said, her voice respectful but tense. "Also, we'll need a statement from you about what happened." David nodded, mentally preparing himself for what was sure to be an awkward conversation. He couldn't help but feel a sense of apprehension. Had he overstepped? What if Kenji had a negative reaction to the EpiPen? Doubt gnawed at his confidence. A few rows ahead, an elderly Japanese woman glanced back at David with a warm smile and whispered something to her companion, who nodded in agreement. It was a small comfort amid the lingering tension. David looked down at his hands, still trembling slightly, and tried to steady his breathing. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. He hadn't even realized it had reconnected to the plane's Wi-Fi. A message from Mira popped up. "Hey, love, just checking in. Hope your flight's going well. Love you." He smiled faintly and texted back, "Love you too. Long story. We'll tell you later." The next few hours passed in relative calm. David managed to get some work done on his laptop, though his mind kept wandering back to the ordeal. Occasionally he would catch snippets of conversation around him, passengers discussing the turbulence, the smoke, and the boy's allergic reaction. The consensus seemed to be that he had saved Kenji's life, but David wasn't so sure. Did Hana feel the same way? When the plane finally touched down in Tokyo, applause broke out spontaneously. Relief washed over everyone as they realized they were safely on the ground. David gathered his belongings, preparing for whatever awaited him. As the passengers began to disembark, one of the flight attendants approached him once again. "Sir, please follow me. The airline staff and medical team would like to speak with you briefly," she said. David nodded and followed her through the narrow aisle, his mind racing. As he passed through the business class section, Hana looked up and their eyes met. To his surprise, she gave him a subtle nod, an unspoken acknowledgement that carried more weight than words. Once off the plane, David was escorted to a private lounge where a small team of airline representatives and medical personnel were waiting. A tall man in a crisp uniform stepped forward, offering a polite bow. "Mr. Carter, I'm Captain Sugimura. I wanted to personally thank you for your brave actions during the flight. Our medical team has confirmed that without your intervention, the boy's condition could have worsened significantly." David nodded, still uncertain how to respond. "I just did what anyone would do." Captain Sugimura smiled slightly. "Perhaps, but not everyone carries an emergency EpiPen or knows how to use it correctly. You saved a life today." Before David could reply, another figure entered the lounge, a tall, imposing man in a tailored suit. His aura of authority was unmistakable, and David quickly realized this must be someone important. The man approached with purposeful strides. "Mr. Carter, I am Kenji Tanaka, head of corporate security for Saito Corporation. Miss Saito and her son are being escorted to a private medical facility, but she has asked me to deliver her gratitude personally." David hesitated. "How is Kenji doing?" "He is stable, thanks to you," Tanaka replied. "Ms. Saito would also like to meet with you once her son is settled. She has requested that I arrange for your transportation to the Saito Corporation headquarters once you are ready." David blinked, trying to process the unexpected invitation. "That's very generous. I just need to pick up my luggage." Tanaka gestured to a uniformed attendant who promptly retrieved David's suitcase. "It's already taken care of. If you're willing, our car is waiting." Realizing he had little choice and intrigued by Hana's sudden shift in attitude, David followed Tanaka out of the terminal. A sleek black limousine awaited them at the curb, and within moments they were gliding through Tokyo's bustling streets. Inside the car, David's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. Emergency on Flight 224. Passenger saves CEO's son with emergency injection. He glanced at the headline, unsure how to feel. His private moment of compassion had suddenly become public knowledge. Tanaka noticed his reaction and spoke calmly. We issued a statement to the media confirming that an allergic reaction occurred and that a fellow passenger administered first aid. Miss Sato wished to maintain discretion, but news travels fast. David leaned back, trying to make sense of the whirlwind he had been thrust into. His career had been on the verge of a breakthrough, and now his name was associated with an international incident. Yet beneath the confusion was a sense of pride. He had acted when it mattered most. The car finally pulled up to the imposing Saito Corporation building, a shimmering glass monolith dominating the Tokyo skyline. As they entered through a private entrance, David couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. He had never imagined stepping into a place like this, much less under these circumstances. Tanaka led him through a series of corridors to an expansive office suite. Hana was standing by the window overlooking the city. When she turned to face him, David was struck by how different she looked. Less composed, more human. She took a hesitant step forward. Mr. Carter? David, I wanted to thank you personally. Her voice faltered, and for the first time, David saw her struggle to maintain her composure. You don't need to thank me, he replied gently. I just did what needed to be done. Hana shook her head, her gaze intense. You saved my son's life. I was so caught up in my own fear, I misjudged you. I was wrong. David hesitated, unsure how to respond to the unexpected apology. Hana's shoulders sagged slightly as if a great weight had been lifted by her admission. Before he could speak, the door behind them opened, and an elderly man with dignified features entered. His presence was commanding, yet there was a softness in his eyes. Tanaka bowed deeply. Chairman Saito, Tanaka greeted respectfully. Hana stepped aside as the chairman approached David. You must be the young man who saved my grandson, he said with a slight smile. I am Saito Hiroshi, founder of Saito Corporation. David extended his hand cautiously, and the chairman shook it with surprising warmth. I wanted to meet the man who reminded my daughter of the value of human decency. Hana looked away, visibly uncomfortable, but accepting her father's gentle reprimand. David couldn't help but notice the vulnerability in her stance. A stark contrast to the iron-willed CEO he had witnessed earlier. Chairman Saito gestured to the seating area. Please sit. I would like to hear more about you. As they sat, Hana poured tea, her hands steady but her movements more subdued. The chairman listened intently as David spoke briefly about his background and his AI project. When he finished, Hiroshi nodded thoughtfully. A man who combines intelligence with compassion is rare, the chairman mused. I understand you have a presentation tomorrow. Yes, sir, David replied, surprised at his knowledge. Consider the resources of Saito Corporation at your disposal, the chairman said. You have already shown that you are not just a brilliant engineer, but also a decent human being. That is the kind of person I want in my network. David was taken aback, unsure how to react. Hana looked at him, her eyes sincere and free from the earlier coldness. We would like to discuss a partnership, Hana said softly. Your project has potential, and I believe we can help make it a reality. David glanced between them, realization dawning that this chance encounter had just reshaped his future in ways he couldn't have imagined. The meeting had gone better than David could have imagined. Chairman Saito's endorsement was more than just validation. It was a potential lifeline for his AI project. Yet, as he left the towering Saito Corporation building, a strange unease settled over him. Something didn't add up. Back at his hotel, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. He tried to unwind, calling Mira to recount the unbelievable turn of events. She listened intently, her voice warm and supportive, but even she could sense his hesitation. David, Mira said gently, I know this is a huge opportunity, but are you sure about them? Something just feels off. David couldn't deny that she was right. There was something unsettling about the whole situation, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He decided to focus on preparing for the presentation the next day. Saito Corporation's backing would guarantee a massive leap forward for his project. That had to be worth the risk. The next morning, as he arrived at the conference center, David noticed a heightened security presence. Uniformed guards lined the hallways, and several men in suits whispered urgently into earpieces. He tried to ignore it, assuming it was just precaution for high-profile guests. As David set up his presentation equipment, his phone buzzed with a notification. An email from an anonymous sender caught his attention. The subject line read, "You are in danger. Do not trust Saito." Heart pounding, he opened the message. Mr. Carter, you have no reason to trust me, but you are being manipulated. Saito Corporation's interest in your project is not what it seems. They plan to take your technology and cut you out once they secure your patents. Do not sign any agreements without consulting a lawyer. Be careful who you trust. David's hands went cold. Was it a prank, or was someone trying to warn him? He glanced around the room, suddenly feeling exposed. He quickly forwarded the email to Mira with a short message. Something's not right. Please look into Saito Corporation's recent deals. Love you. Just as he sent the message, Hana appeared at the door, looking impeccable as always. She smiled warmly, but David couldn't help but sense a tension behind her expression. David, she greeted, her tone pleasant. Are you ready for the presentation? Yes, almost, he replied, forcing a smile. Just making some final adjustments. She nodded, seemingly unaware of his discomfort. My father will be here shortly. He's very much looking forward to seeing your work. As she walked away, David's mind raced. Was Hana involved in whatever scheme the email hinted at, or was she just another piece in a larger game? His instincts told him to be cautious. He checked his phone again, hoping for a reply from Mira. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. Mira had sent a link to a news article along with a text. Check this out. Saito's hostile takeover scandal from last year. Be careful. David clicked the link, his stomach tightening as he read the article. The report detailed how Saito Corporation had aggressively acquired a smaller tech firm, promising collaboration and then forcing the original team out once they secured the intellectual property. The CEO of the acquired company had filed a lawsuit, claiming coercion and breach of contract, but the case was quietly settled out of court. David felt a surge of anger and fear. Was he about to fall into the same trap? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay composed. If they were trying to manipulate him, he needed proof. The presentation went smoothly despite David's nerves. He spoke confidently about his AI project, the data analytics, and the potential to revolutionize traffic systems worldwide. The audience responded positively, but David noticed Hiroshi and Hana exchanging glances throughout his talk. After the presentation, Hiroshi approached him, smiling broadly. Magnificent, David. Your vision is truly groundbreaking. Thank you, sir, David replied, trying to read the man's intentions. Hiroshi gestured for him to follow into a private meeting room, where Hana and a few executives were waiting. As soon as the door closed, Hana handed him a contract. We would like to formalize our partnership as soon as possible, she said smoothly. This agreement ensures funding and full project support under the Saito Corporation banner. David took the document but didn't immediately sign. I appreciate your enthusiasm, he said carefully, but I'd like to have my legal team review this first. Hana's smile faltered slightly and Hiroshi's eyes narrowed. Surely you trust us by now, David, Hiroshi said, his tone calm but firm. You saved my grandson's life. This is just a formality. David kept his tone polite but resolute. I've learned to always consult legal advice, no matter the circumstances. It's just good business practice. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Hannah glanced at her father, who nodded subtly. Of course, she conceded. We'll give you time to review it. As David left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had narrowly avoided a trap. He texted Mira to find a lawyer familiar with Japanese corporate law. His instincts screamed that something was deeply wrong. That night at his hotel, David couldn't sleep. Around midnight, his phone vibrated with another message from the anonymous sender. You did well not to sign. Be careful. They will not take rejection lightly. I will contact you again soon. His paranoia intensified. Who was trying to protect him? And how much danger was he really in? Just as he was about to reply, he heard a noise outside his door. Footsteps, muffled voices. Panic surged through him. Quietly, he moved to the door and listened. One voice, low and authoritative, said, "He hasn't left yet." Make sure he doesn't. David's blood ran cold. They were watching him. Thinking quickly, he gathered his belongings and slipped out through the emergency exit at the end of the hall. He made his way down the fire escape and onto the crowded Tokyo streets, blending into the late-night crowd. He kept moving, paranoia pushing him to stay alert. Finding a quiet cafe, he huddled in a corner and called Mira. "They're trying to trap me," he whispered. "I think they're after my research, and they're willing to get rid of me to take it." Mira's voice was steady, though he could hear the fear. "David, get somewhere safe. I'll contact the embassy and get you some help. Don't trust anyone." Hanging up, David knew he couldn't go back to the hotel. He needed allies, someone in Japan who wasn't connected to Saito. As he scrolled through his contacts, one name popped up. Takashi Mori, a fellow AI researcher he had met at a previous conference. They had shared ideas over drinks and exchanged numbers. Mori worked independently and had a reputation for opposing corporate monopolies. David hesitated, then dialed. After 3 rings, a groggy but familiar voice answered. "Hello? Mori-san, it's David Carter. I'm in trouble. Can you meet me?" There was a pause before Mori replied, instantly alert. "Where are you?" David gave his location, and Mori promised to be there soon. As he waited, David couldn't help but think of Hana and Kenji. Was she part of this, or was she just another pawn like him? One thing was certain, he couldn't let Saito Corporation get his project. Not if they were willing to play dirty. He checked his phone once more. Another message appeared from the anonymous sender. "Don't trust Hana. She's playing both sides. The board is using her to secure your technology. Leave the city if you can." David's heart pounded. Who was telling the truth? And how much time did he have before they found him? As Mori arrived and beckoned him to a waiting taxi, David knew one thing. He couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. The game had changed, and now it was his move. The taxi sped through the neon-lit streets of Tokyo, weaving between traffic as David and Mori sat in tense silence. David couldn't stop glancing over his shoulder, paranoia gnawing at him. He could still feel the weight of danger pressing against his spine, as if eyes were watching from every shadow. Mori broke the silence, his tone cautious yet urgent. "David, I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but Saito Corporation is no joke. They've been quietly devouring smaller tech firms for years. What's going on?" David took a shaky breath and quickly explained the events. Kenji's allergic reaction on the plane, his intervention, the unexpected offer from Chairman Saito, and the threatening messages. Mori listened intently, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. "I've heard rumors about hostile takeovers and corporate espionage, but if they're targeting you, it's because your project is groundbreaking," Mori mused. "They must see it as the key to dominating the AI market." David felt a chill run down his spine. "They wanted me to sign a contract immediately. It felt like a trap. When I refused, things got strange. Someone warned me not to trust Hana, but I don't know who to believe." Mori thought for a moment before responding. "There's someone who might help. An old friend of mine. Kaito Nakamura. He used to work in Saito's legal department before he left under suspicious circumstances. If anyone knows what's really going on behind the scenes, it's him. They agreed to meet Kaito at a small, inconspicuous bar in Shinjuku, one frequented by corporate workers trying to drown their stress in cheap drinks. The place was dimly lit, with faded posters peeling from the walls and the scent of grilled yakitori lingering in the air. Kaito was already there, a weary-looking man with graying hair and tired eyes, nursing a glass of whiskey. When Mori introduced David, Kaito gave a slight nod, but his eyes remained sharp and perceptive. "So, you're the engineer stirring up trouble," Kaito remarked. "Why would Saito Corporation risk everything for your project?" David hesitated before answering. "It's an AI-driven traffic management system. It uses real-time data from thousands of sources to predict and prevent congestion, accidents, and environmental impacts. It's adaptive and self-learning, could save cities billions." Kaito's expression darkened. "That explains it. Saito's been quietly acquiring patents in traffic and urban planning. Your project would tie all those technologies together into a monopoly. If they own your system, they own the future of smart cities worldwide." A surge of anger and fear coursed through David. "So they're planning to take it and kick me out?" Kaito gave a bitter laugh. "If you're lucky. If not, they might make sure you disappear entirely. You're a liability as long as you refuse to sign. And Hana, she's trapped. She can't defy her father, not after he took over as CEO again. She has no real power, just a puppet in his hands." David's mind reeled. He wanted to believe that Hana's gratitude had been genuine, but now he wasn't so sure. "So, what do I do?" Kaito glanced around the bar to ensure no one was listening. "First, we gather evidence. Saito's legal team is ruthless, but they're not perfect. There's a digital archive at the headquarters. Old contracts, hidden clauses, internal memos. If we can get in, I know how to extract data from their system." David looked at him skeptically. "And how do we break into one of the most secure corporate buildings in Japan?" Kaito smirked. "You forget, I helped design their security protocols. I know the weak points." Despite his doubts, David realized it was his only chance to expose the conspiracy. "All right, let's do it." 2 nights later, they stood outside the Saito Corporation building, cloaked in darkness. Mori stayed behind as lookout while David and Kaito approached the service entrance. Using an old employee keycard, Kaito bypassed the initial scan and hacked the access panel, granting them entry to the maintenance corridors. The halls were deserted, and their footsteps echoed faintly as they navigated toward the server room. Kaito whispered instructions, guiding David through a maze of interconnected passageways. They reached the data center, a massive room lined with humming server racks. Kaito pulled out a portable hacking device and connected it to the main terminal. "This will take a few minutes. Keep watch," he muttered. David stood by the door, ears straining for any sign of security. Just as he began to relax, he heard faint footsteps approaching. Panicked, he signaled Kaito, who cursed under his breath. "They must have detected an anomaly," Kaito whispered. "We need more time." David scanned the room and spotted a ventilation shaft. "Can we hide?" "No time," Kaito replied, furiously typing. "Almost there." The door opened suddenly and 2 security guards entered. David froze, desperately thinking of an excuse. One of the guards squinted at him. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Thinking fast, David feigned confusion. "Maintenance. We got a report about overheating in the server room. Just checking the temperature modules." The guards looked skeptical. "Who authorized this?" David glanced at Kaito, who subtly flashed an employee badge he had forged earlier. "Mr. Watanabe from IT," Kaito chimed in. "Check your log." One of the guards pulled out a tablet, scrolling through. Just then, Kaito's device beeped. "Got it," he whispered. Before the guards could react, Kaito hit a button that triggered a temporary power outage in the server room, plunging them into darkness. Taking advantage of the confusion, they slipped out through the emergency exit and sprinted down the corridor. Did you get the files? David panted. Kaito grinned. Every dirty secret they've tried to bury. Let's get out of here. Back at Mori's apartment, they examined the data. It was worse than they imagined. Documents proving Saito's hostile takeovers, coercion tactics, and evidence that Hana had been pressured into manipulating David. Worst of all, there were encrypted messages hinting at plans to discredit or eliminate David if he didn't cooperate. Bastards, Mori muttered, scrolling through the files. This will bury them. David's phone rang, an unknown number. Hesitating, he answered. A familiar voice spoke. David, it's Hana. I know what you're doing. He tensed, his jaw clenched. And what's that? A long pause. You're digging for dirt on my family, I get it, but please, meet me. There's something you need to know. I didn't know how far my father was willing to go. David hesitated. Was this another trap? But something in her voice sounded different. Raw, desperate. I'll meet you, he agreed cautiously. But if this is a setup... It's not, Hana interrupted. I'll prove it. Come to the old botanical garden at midnight. Alone. Kaito gave David a warning look, but David nodded, determination hardening his resolve. I have to find out the truth. That night, as David approached the abandoned garden, he spotted Hana standing alone, shivering against the chill. She looked pale and exhausted. I know I've hurt you, she whispered. I was following orders, trying to protect my son, but I didn't realize how ruthless my father had become. David didn't lower his guard. Why should I believe you? She pulled out a flash drive. This has everything, the real plans. They never intended to honor your contract. They're going to frame you for corporate theft, make you look like a saboteur. My father plans to destroy your reputation and take full credit for your work. David's hands trembled as he took the drive. Why are you telling me this now? Tears welled in her eyes. Because I owe you my son's life. And because I hate what I've become. I was too afraid to stand up to him. But you showed me that courage is worth the risk. Before David could respond, headlights cut through the darkness. Multiple black SUVs screeched to a halt and armed men poured out, led by Tanaka. Hana froze, her face paling. Tanaka's expression was grim. Miss Saito, you've been compromised. Step away from him. David clenched his fists. She's done being your puppet. Tanaka raised a gun, but Hana moved in front of David, shielding him. If you hurt him, my son will never forgive you, she stated, her voice trembling but resolute. Tanaka hesitated, his resolve wavering. Just then, police sirens wailed in the distance. Mori had called in a tip, buying them precious time. Realizing they were outnumbered, Tanaka cursed and signaled the men to retreat. As the SUVs peeled away, Hana collapsed into David's arms, sobbing with relief. For the first time, David felt a glimmer of hope. They might actually have a chance to fight back. The dawn light crept over Tokyo, painting the skyline in hues of amber and rose. David sat on the edge of a rusted park bench, his mind racing. Mori was on his way with a plan to leak the incriminating documents to the media, while Hana sat beside him, still shaken from the confrontation with Tanaka. The garden around them remained eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Hana broke the silence, her voice raw and exhausted. My father will never forgive me for this. He will see it as betrayal. David looked at her, trying to gauge her sincerity. Why did you finally decide to go against him? Hana hesitated, her eyes glistening with tears. Because I realized that my fear of him cost me my integrity. You risked your life to save Kenji without thinking twice. I couldn't keep living with myself knowing I was letting the same people who manipulated me destroy you. David remained silent, unsure whether to feel relief or suspicion. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was Mori, his tone hurried and agitated. David, you need to move. Saito's men are looking for you. They're pulling in every favor they have with the police and trying to label you as a fugitive. You've been framed for corporate sabotage. They're accusing you of hacking into Cyto Corporation and stealing confidential data. A cold dread settled over David. What? That's impossible. I found the fabricated evidence. It's clean, meticulously planted in your personal server back home. They've already alerted the embassy. You're not safe. David looked at Hana, panic rising in his chest. They've set me up. Your father's framing me. Hana's face turned pale. He's faster than I thought. We need leverage, something that will force him to retreat. Mori interrupted, his voice tight with urgency. David, I have one more lead. A private vault under Cyto Tower. Only the chairman has access. If there's any leverage against him, it's there, but it's risky as hell. David nodded. We have no choice. Meet us near the tower. We're going in. The city was buzzing with police activity as David and Hana maneuvered through the back alleys, making their way toward the towering monolith that was Cyto Corporation's headquarters. Mori met them a few blocks away, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. They've tightened security, Mori noted, eyeing the surveillance drones hovering above the entrance. We'll need to use the service tunnels to get in. Hana hesitated. There's a sub-basement entrance behind the utility building. It's not in the security logs. My father had it built for emergencies. With Hana guiding them, they slipped through narrow passageways and reached the utility building. Mori hacked the maintenance lock, and they slid inside just as two guards passed by, oblivious to their presence. Inside the dimly lit tunnel, Hana led them down a spiral staircase to a steel door marked Restricted Access. She took a deep breath. My father's biometric data is the only way in. David frowned. Then how? I can bypass it, Mori interjected. If Hana can pull up any of his personal data from her phone, I might be able to generate a bypass code. Hana accessed her encrypted files, scrolling through until she found an old access profile of her father. Mori plugged it into his device, fingers flying over the keyboard. Seconds ticked by, and just as David began to fear they were out of time, the scanner flashed green and the door clicked open. The vault beyond was massive, rows of secure cabinets and data terminals glowing softly in the low light. Mori immediately headed to the main terminal, plugging in his device to decrypt the data. Find anything incriminating, David urged, scanning the room. Anything we can use to force him to back down. As Mori sifted through the data, his eyes widened. Oh my God. David, look at this. David leaned over, his heart pounding as he read through files outlining plans for Project Phoenix, a covert initiative to use David's AI system to manipulate urban infrastructure, creating deliberate traffic disasters to coerce governments into adopting Cyto systems. Casualty estimates were in the thousands. It's not just about control, Mori whispered. It's about creating a necessity, manufacturing chaos to make themselves indispensable. Hana looked horrified, realizing the depth of her father's ambition. He would sacrifice lives, just to cement his power. Footsteps echoed outside. Tanaka's voice boomed from the corridor. Search the sub-basement. They're here somewhere. Mori cursed under his breath. I need 5 more minutes. David scanned the room and found a side corridor leading to a ventilation shaft. We'll distract them. Finish what you need. Grabbing Hana's hand, David pulled her into the narrow passage just as Tanaka's men breached the vault. Huddled in the darkness, they listened as Tanaka barked orders. One of the guards cursed. Who activated the vault access? Tanaka's voice was cold. They're in here. Sweep the entire level. Shoot on sight. David squeezed Hana's hand, signaling for silence. Sweat trickled down his forehead as the guards moved through the main chamber. Suddenly, Mori's voice crackled in David's earpiece. I got it. Uploading everything to the cloud. They'll be publicly exposed in minutes. David allowed himself a brief smile of triumph before hearing the distinct sound of a gun being cocked right behind him. He turned slowly to see Tanaka, gun aimed directly at his head. You never should have come back, Tanaka sneered. You're dead, Carter. Before Tanaka could pull the trigger, Hana stepped in front of David, her voice steely. Tanaka, lower your weapon. This is over. Tanaka's eyes narrowed. You're defending him now? Your father won't forgive this. Hana held her ground. If you shoot him, I will make sure my father knows you disobeyed me. You'll lose everything. Tanaka hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear. Just then, Mori's voice echoed through the chamber from the main terminal. Hey, Tanaka, check the news. Tanaka looked at the terminal where news reports were flashing. Headlines read, Saito Corporation Scandal. Leaked documents reveal corruption and endangerment of public safety. Tanaka's expression faltered. Realizing that Saito Corporation was collapsing in real time, he lowered his gun, fury etched into his face. You've ruined everything, he snarled at David. David stepped forward, his own anger flaring. Number, your boss did that. You just followed blindly. As sirens blared outside and law enforcement flooded the building, Tanaka and his men dropped their weapons, surrendering as the police took control. Mori met up with David and Hana, relief evident in his expression. It's over, Mori said. The data's out and the authorities are taking over. Saito's influence won't protect him from this. David turned to Hana, whose face was streaked with silent tears. What happens to you now? He asked. She shook her head slowly. I have to face him. But thank you for giving me the strength to do what's right. David reached out, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You're stronger than you think. A week later, with the scandal fully unveiled and Saito Corporation under investigation, David returned home to Mira and the boys. As he walked through the door, Mira wrapped him in a tight embrace, holding him as if afraid to let go. You're home, she whispered. Yeah, David replied, his voice thick with emotion. It's finally over. On the TV behind them, a news report detailed how Saito Hiroshi had been taken into custody, and how Hana Saito had resigned from her position, publicly condemning her father's actions. Mori's tech firm had risen to prominence, praised for exposing the corruption. David glanced at his phone, where a single text from Hana awaited. Thank you for giving me back my conscience. He smiled faintly, finally feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. The storm had passed, and from the ruins of deception, a new beginning was taking shape. 3 months had passed since the collapse of Saito Corporation. The world watched as the mighty empire of Hiroshi Saito crumbled under the weight of countless lawsuits, media scrutiny, and public outrage. The name once synonymous with innovation and dominance now symbolized greed, corruption, and ruthless ambition. David Carter, meanwhile, had returned to his life in Chicago, trying to put the chaos behind him. The media frenzy had followed him home, with reporters hounding him for interviews and news networks dissecting every detail of the scandal. David had managed to maintain his privacy, refusing to give statements and allowing Mori to handle most of the public fallout. Mori's new tech firm, now hailed as a beacon of corporate transparency, had thrived since the exposure. One crisp autumn morning, David sat in his favorite corner cafe, sipping coffee and reading through a draft proposal for a new collaboration between Mori's company and a coalition of independent urban planners. His phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Hana. Can we meet? I'm in Chicago for a few days. I really need to see you, please. David hesitated. After everything that had happened, he wasn't sure how he felt about seeing her. Part of him still carried the anger and mistrust from the betrayal, but another part knew that Hana had risked her life to do the right thing in the end. He replied with a simple message. Okay, same cafe as last time. Noon. When Hana arrived, David was struck by how different she looked, less composed and polished and more human. She wore a simple black coat, her hair tied back, and a hint of sadness lingered in her eyes. Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Hana said softly, taking a seat. David nodded, unsure of how to begin. You look different. Hana gave a faint, rueful smile. I guess facing your demons changes you. I came to Chicago because I wanted to apologize. For everything. David looked at her, sensing the weight of guilt in her posture. You did the right thing in the end. You didn't have to stand up to Tanaka or your father, but you did. She looked down at her hands, clasping them tightly. I was so blinded by my father's approval that I lost sight of my own values. Kenji almost lost his mother to ambition. You saved him, and I almost repaid you with betrayal. I've been struggling to make sense of it all. David sighed, his tone softening. Fear makes us do things we're not proud of. I've learned that myself, but you broke free from that fear. That's what matters now. Hana's eyes glistened with tears. I wanted to tell you that I've been working on something new, something good. I'm starting a foundation to support tech innovation in underserved communities, using the funds I had set aside before the scandal. I want to make things right. David raised an eyebrow, surprised but impressed. That's actually a great idea. Using your resources to build instead of destroy. Hana nodded, her smile weak but genuine. It's not enough to make up for everything, but it's a start. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the weight between them slowly dissipating. Finally, Hana spoke again. Your AI project. What's next for it? David considered the question, grateful to have something positive to focus on. I'm partnering with Mori's firm to develop a more open-source version of the system, one that cities around the world can adapt without corporate interference. We're designing it with community input, making sure it's accessible to everyone. Hana smiled, genuinely this time. That's exactly what it should be. Used for good, not control. You're doing it right. David hesitated, sensing there was something more Hana wanted to say. She looked at him with vulnerability in her eyes, something he had never seen before. David, do you think there's a chance for us to ever be friends again? He studied her carefully, weighing the emotions that had tangled between them. In the end, he gave her a small, reassuring nod. I think that's possible. We both made mistakes. But we also fought for what was right when it mattered most. I'd like to see where that leads. Hana's relief was palpable, and for the first time in a long while, she seemed genuinely at peace. Over the next few months, David threw himself into his work with renewed energy. Mori's firm, now rebranded as Phoenix Tech, became a powerhouse for urban innovation. David's AI system, now called Harbor, was being piloted in cities across the globe with tremendous success. One day, David received a call from an unfamiliar number. When he picked up, a familiar, gravelly voice greeted him. Mr. Carter, this is Detective Watanabe with the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. I thought you should know. Saito Hiroshi took his own life last night in custody. David was stunned into silence. After everything the man had done, it seemed incomprehensible that he would choose to end his life rather than face justice. Watanabe continued, his voice somber. He left a letter, addressed to you. I'll send you a copy. Later that evening, David opened the scanned letter on his laptop. The handwriting was neat, precise, and unwavering despite the circumstances. Mr. Carter, in my pursuit of legacy, I lost sight of my humanity. You forced me to confront my own flaws, and in doing so, you exposed the rot that had festered within me. My pride blinded me to the cost of my ambition. You are a man of integrity, a rarity in this world. My daughter chose well when she aligned herself with you. Take care of Hana and Kenji. They deserve a future free from my sins. Saito Hiroshi. David sat back, the weight of the message settling on him. He didn't feel satisfaction or vindication, only a sense of profound sadness for a man who had lost his way and destroyed himself in the process. He forwarded the letter to Hana with a simple message. Be strong. Kenji needs you. That night, as David sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, he felt a calm settle over him. The past few months had tested his strength, his morals, and his heart, but he had emerged with his integrity intact. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, David opened his laptop to continue his work on Harbor, determined to ensure it would be a beacon of hope rather than a weapon of control. His phone buzzed with a message from Maury. New city contract secured. Your vision is becoming a reality. Let's celebrate soon. Smiling to himself, David typed a quick reply. We've just begun. Let's make this world a better place. And with that, he returned to his project, knowing that while battles had been fought and won, the real journey was just beginning. The story of David Carter and Hana Saito is a powerful reflection on the beauty of human nature, cultural redemption, and the transformative power of compassion in the face of prejudice and ambition. At its core, it serves as a profound reminder of the damage caused by racism, discrimination, and unchecked power, while also celebrating the capacity for growth, forgiveness, and understanding. One of the most striking lessons from this story is the destructive nature of racism and prejudice, particularly when it manifests as contempt and disdain for people of color. From the very beginning, David faced discrimination and implicit bias, not just as a person of color, but also as someone whose achievements were often overlooked or questioned due to preconceived notions. The incident on the plane where Hana instinctively reacted with fear and hostility towards David revealed the ingrained prejudices that even highly educated and accomplished individuals can harbor. It highlights how racism is not just overt acts of hatred, but also subtle biases that lead to harmful assumptions and judgments. In David's case, his race and appearance became grounds for suspicion and dehumanization, even though his intentions were purely compassionate. Yet, the story also demonstrates the redemptive power of human connection and how compassion can dismantle even the most deeply rooted biases. When David selflessly saved Kenji's life, his act of kindness shattered Hana's preconceived image of him. It forced her to confront the uncomfortable truth about her own prejudices, igniting a journey of self-reflection and change. This turning point in Hana's character serves as a critical lesson that humanizing others and stepping beyond stereotypes can lead to profound personal transformation. The real beauty of human nature lies not only in the willingness to help others, but also in the ability to recognize and challenge one's own flaws and biases. The story further emphasizes the importance of integrity and moral courage in the face of immense pressure and danger. David, despite being wronged and manipulated, refused to compromise his values. Even when confronted with betrayal and hostility, he chose the path of integrity, fighting back not with vengeance but with truth and resilience. His commitment to doing what was right, regardless of the personal cost, stands as an inspiring example of how dignity and honesty can prevail against corruption and moral decay. It shows that true strength lies not in dominating others but in standing firm in one's principles, even when the world seems determined to break them. Moreover, the narrative also brings to light the consequences of unchecked ambition and the corrupting influence of power. Saito Hiroshi's obsession with legacy and control led him to sacrifice not only his own humanity, but also the trust and love of his daughter. His ruthless pursuit of dominance blinded him to the real impact of his actions, ultimately leading to his downfall and demise. This serves as a sobering reminder that power pursued without conscience is destined to collapse, leaving behind ruins and regret. Through Hiroshi's tragic end, the story cautions against losing one's soul in the pursuit of greatness, reminding readers that ambition should never come at the cost of humanity and ethical responsibility. Another invaluable lesson from the story is the power of forgiveness and redemption. Despite her past mistakes and betrayal, Hana found the strength to face the consequences of her choices and sought to rebuild her life with integrity. Her decision to establish a foundation to support innovation in underserved communities symbolizes her desire to use her influence for positive change rather than dominance. This act of atonement underscores the idea that redemption is possible when one acknowledges past wrongs and commits to making amends. It is a powerful message that no matter how deep the mistakes, there is always a path toward restoration if one chooses to act with sincerity and courage. In the end, David's journey also teaches us about the importance of perseverance and the willingness to rise above pain and betrayal. Instead of succumbing to bitterness, he chose to channel his experiences into building something meaningful, an open-source AI system that prioritized community and humanity over profit and control. Through his actions, David demonstrated that healing from injustice involves not only seeking accountability, but also creating new pathways that reflect the values of fairness and inclusion. The story's portrayal of cultural differences also highlights the importance of empathy and open-mindedness. Hannah's journey from prejudice to understanding symbolizes the breaking down of cultural and racial barriers. It emphasizes that genuine connection and compassion transcend race, nationality, and social status. By choosing to see David not as a threat but as a person who saved her son, Hannah learned the value of judging others by their character rather than their appearance. It is a profound reminder that the world becomes a better place when we choose empathy over judgment and humanity over division. Ultimately, the story of David and Hannah serves as a call to confront our own biases and challenge systems of oppression with courage and honesty. It inspires readers to reflect on their own values and the ways in which they interact with those who are different from them. It reminds us that no matter how complex and flawed human nature can be, the capacity for growth, redemption, and moral clarity is always within reach. By embracing compassion, integrity, and accountability, we can build a future where justice prevails and human dignity is upheld without exception.